So, Michelle, say hello.
Hello, everyone. So glad to be here.
Yes, we are so super excited to have you. And, I know who you are and many people know who you are. But for those who do not know Michelle Cushatt, why don't you just take a quick moment and give us a little bio of yourself?
Okay, a quick bio. Let's see. I'm an author and speaker. I've written 2 books with Zondervan. The first one's Undone. Second one is I Am. This came out earlier this year. I have been speaking internationally for going on 10 years now. So I've spoken all over the world, but mostly the U.S., everywhere, doing everything from business events to church events, women's events, all kinds of communication training, all different kinds of things like that. In addition, I've done podcasting for about 3 years. Many of you probably have heard me on This Is Your Life with Michael Hyatt. I was a co-host with Michael for about 2 years doing that podcast. I also do another podcast with Kathy Lip called the Communicator Academy podcast, where we do everything that we can to help those who want to be authors and speakers to be able to build up their own business, their own entrepreneurial business, and know how to be able to do that as an author and speaker. And then in addition, I do tons of consulting with executives and other public speakers and communicators, helping them either develop their brand or to learn how to deliver a message to a crowd. And most importantly, I am married to Troy, a wonderful man, live in Denver, Colorado, and we have, are you ready for this?
Ready.
6 kids, ages 25, 24, 20, 11, 10, 10.
That is awesome. That is just awesome. And I'm sure people who don't know your story are like, wow, that is a spread, isn't it?
It is a spread.
And I know we're going to get into in a minute sort of how that spread came to be. So you have awesome credentials, and as somebody who sort of wants to be like you when I grow up, because speaking and doing what you do is part of what I love as well. So there's a lot I can learn from you professionally, and we can relate very well as moms, although I have 2. So I've only got 1/3 of the mom busyness that you have.
It's busy no matter what. I mean, once you have one, it's just busy across the board.
That's true. That's true. And if we were talking all day, you and I could get into a great discussion, because you've already launched some kids and I'm getting ready to launch mine. And that's a whole nother new parenting world that I'm about to step into. But so as wife and mom, and since this is sort of a community that's focused on families, I thought we'd spend some time today really zeroing in on your story as a wife and mom, and your family story. And, we have all kinds of people in this community. We have your traditional families with mom, dad, and kids. We also have single parent families. We have blended families. And I just know that you can sort of relate to all of those.
To all of them.
Can't you?
As I like to tell people, I'm an overachiever. So that means I try to touch every single possible aspect of family. So that way I can have a wealth of experience.
and that you do. So why don't you tell us about that a little bit? I'm sure when you were young and about to get married, you just didn't have a plan of being all A, B, C, D, and E. So
no, I didn't.
About that.
All right. So, I grew up with, what many girls consider a dream of a happy family, of marrying a wonderful man someday and having a family. That was really what I wanted more than anything. I did very well in school. I was very academic. And so I knew I could do anything I wanted to do for the most part from a career standpoint. But really all my heart ever wanted was to be a wife and a mom. And so I got married at 21, and I thought, 21. By the way, when I was 21 and got married, I thought I was so old. I thought if I didn't get married then, I was going to be an old
right
man.
Out of college. It was like college, get married. That's what we have to do. I thought the same thing.
And in my head, I was an old woman, and now I just laugh when I think about that I was so young. So 21, got married at 21, and thought that all the pieces were falling into place for this perfect life that I had dreamed of. But unexpectedly, after about 6.5 years, I ended up a single mom of a 1.5-year-old boy. And so I became one of those people who ends up divorced that never in a million years expected to be divorced, wanted to be divorced. I mean, I had no desire to be divorced and had no idea what to do. I think I was 27 years old as a single mom. And in my mind, my life was over. You know, I didn't think that a person who had basically blown it in something that she considered the most important thing in life, which was family. If I had blown it there, then there was really no future for me. And so that was a huge wrecking of my dream and even my sense of myself.
I'm sure. And then what happened?
Well, then I got to navigate 2 years as a single mom with a little boy who was a toddler, which was its own, we could do a whole interview just on those years.
Right.
That was its own challenge. And then I met a man at church named Troy, and he was a single dad of 2 boys. I was a single mom of 1 boy. And we thought, wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be fun to create a family together? You know, because in the movies, it always works out so perfectly. And so we got married and started a blended family. And then we discovered that all the television shows and movies were lying, that blended families are not easy, they're hard.
Oh my goodness. What? They're hard? It's not the Brady Bunch just like that?
No, it's not. It was so hard. So here we got married. We got married in April. We had 1 night together as husband and wife. And then we went home and picked up our boys from school and immediately started doing homework. Less than 24 hours from the moment we got married. We had a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 9-year-old, and we just dove in and started doing homework. And I thought, oh, we are not in Kansas anymore.
That's right, Dorothy.
And so, yeah, I mean, the next several years were just stick with the whole process of learning how to be a family. The truth is when you get married after divorce, every member of the family is coming into this new situation somewhat broken. So they've gone through a major loss, the parents as well as the children. And you can't throw 5 people who have gone through major loss into a house, a relatively small house. This was a tiny house. Throw 5 people into the small house together and not expect some tension. And so in the years that followed, I mean, we were all just learning how to be a family, how to navigate roles, how to have a brand new marriage with children, how to parent children that weren't yours. And at the same time, healing from our own individual losses as a result of divorce. And so it was just, I mean, to say it was complicated and messy just doesn't even quite cover it.
Well, and yet you made it through that time. And before we go further down the road, because I know we have many, many families that are in the trenches right now. As a matter of fact, next week, we're interviewing one of our families who are exactly, they put together something called Better Than Blended, and they're sharing some of the lessons they've learned along the way. Why don't you just share maybe number 1 most important lesson that you learned to try and make things work with the blended family? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
Yes, you are. Well, you know, I think one of the hardest things is that when you have a blended family, you already bring into it somewhat of a sense of shame and failure, because the existence of the second marriage, in most cases, not always, sometimes a second marriage is a result of a death. So you're a widow or whatever. But in the second marriage, it's coming as a result of something not going according to plan. And so because of that, there's this undercurrent of guilt or regret or sadness or grief or shame or whatever. And as a result of that, we tend to not ask for help because we don't like to admit that things are hard. Because with this undercurrent of guilt or regret, it makes us actually want to pull in and be more silent. But the truth is the best thing you can do as a person who's in a blended family, a step family situation, is ask for help. The best thing you can do is not be afraid to say, hey, we're navigating a complicated situation and it's not always easy. Can you help? And whether that's getting a counselor, whether that's going to a conference, whether that's listening in to the next session you have with the people talking about blended family. But it's admitting the fact that it's hard and it's complicated and we can't do it alone. And that's probably the thing that I see most with blended families is they tend to isolate. Things are so hard. And really, they wake up every day just trying to survive. And in that survival mode, we don't make space to actually create community and relationship and ask for help. And that's the one thing that we need to do most of all.
Well, it almost sounds like I should be giving you a payment for saying that, because that is exactly what our Thrive community stands on, is we're standing here as a bunch of families trying to be here for each other, trying to provide that help and that feedback. You know, we have a little forum on Facebook where people can say, hey, we're having this struggle right now. Has anybody been there? And 100 times out of 100, somebody else has been there and done that. And you know, I think blended families, but even, like I said, I'm about to launch my first daughter to college. There are so many questions I have, and thank goodness for communities and for, you know, our people that we can talk to. So that is fantastic advice. And so, okay, so you have these now 3 children that you're raising together, right? And
yes, and they're all boys, by the way, 3 boys. So, you know, let's just expose that
peaceful house, right? No, nothing rambunctious.
Oh my goodness, it was loud and messy and sometimes ugly and sometimes wonderful. It was a big old mess all the time and very loud. The whole process was very loud. So yes, here we are, raising 3 boys together, going through adolescence and the teen years together was its own. We could do a whole nother video on that too.
I'm sure. And yet, like I said, you made it through. You had, I believe, let's see, I'm now getting to the point of 2010. You had one graduated, right? And another one about to graduate. Is that right?
That is exactly right. So
you're starting to think of, go ahead.
Yeah, we have one that had just graduated in May. So this is toward the end of 2010. One had just graduated. We had the second one who was a senior in high school. Yes, we had 2 that were back to back. A senior in high school. So we were on the verge of launching that second one. And then we had a third one that was a teenager. He was 13. So he was just right there on the cusp of, you know, learning to drive, being more independent, doing high school, all of that. So we were starting to dream of empty nest. We originally thought empty nest was this barren wasteland for parents who didn't know what to do. And then we had teenagers. And that's when we realized that empty nest was God's gift to us for surviving.
And you start making these plans because you're like, we have this freedom now. We can travel. We can downsize. And so you were having that vision of the future. And I know that, you know, we all get our nice little plan, and I'm very type A. And when I have my plan, I like things to go accordingly. So
yes, that's what's supposed to happen.
Yes. And so then, you know, I've heard one time said, when we plan, God laughs. And I don't mean that in any kind of a bad or malicious way, but that's just to say things rarely seem to go according to plan. And so tell us about Thanksgiving 2010. How did things change at that time for you?
Okay, so Thanksgiving 2010, I'll never forget. It was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. I'll never forget it. Woke up. It was an ordinary day of getting the boys ready for school, getting them out the door, you know, all of that, where you're like throwing sandwiches together and you're yelling at them to get their homework in their backpacks and trying to get them on the bus and everything. And I had just got them out of the door. My husband was on his way out the door to work for the day. And my phone rang about 8:30 in the morning. Didn't think anything about it, picked it up. But on the other end of the phone was my doctor. And what had happened is the week before, I had gone into the doctor's office. I had an ulcer on the side of my tongue that would not heal. And, you know, we all get little tiny sores on the inside of our mouth if we bite our cheek or bite our tongue or whatever. But this particular one wouldn't go away. And so I finally went to the doctor because the pain was such that I just couldn't deal with it anymore. But he had told me no less than a half dozen times that it's nothing. You have nothing to worry about, Michelle. It's nothing. Until that Tuesday morning at 8:30 when he called and said, "I'm sorry, Michelle, I was wrong. It's not good." And basically, over the next couple of minutes, I found out that I had squamous cell carcinoma of the tongue, cancer of the tongue, which I didn't even know existed. So here I was, a woman who makes a living as a communicator, as a speaker and a writer, and then all of a sudden, the very thing that I rely on, both as a mom and a wife, but also as a career woman, was at stake. My speech, my ability to eat and talk and do all that. But worse, it was cancer. And so the moment you and I hear the word cancer, basically our mortality comes crashing down and we're forced to face it in point blank range. And that's exactly what happened that morning.
Wow. Now I have to ask, did you instantly go and Google it to see what that meant and then get even more worried, or what did you do next?
Well, interesting enough, and I didn't share this in my bio, my degree, I actually have a bachelor's of science degree in nursing. So nursing is actually my history years and years and years ago. And so because of my history in nursing, I knew better than to Google WebMD and look it up.
Very smart.
Like, do not go on the internet. Do not go on the internet. So I didn't. But also because of my medical history, I knew enough to know that this needed to be taken seriously.
Right. And then, tell us what happened next. And especially from the sort of the standpoint of how did it affect your family and how did things go with family life then?
Well, the first couple of days was just me trying to take in the information. I mean, here it was Thanksgiving. So the last thing I wanted to do was tell my children right during Thanksgiving. But over the course of the next couple of weeks, what happened is, lots of doctor's appointments and PET scans and blood tests. And then my doctor scheduled a surgery where they would go in and cut out a certain small section of my tongue to remove it. And then to make a determination at that point what other treatment or options needed to happen. And it turned out at that time that it was cancer caught early. It was kind of a best case scenario. They had caught it early. They removed it. And so basically we all just put cancer in a box and put it on the shelf and never expected to see it again. That was it. Now, that being said, it still took a toll on our family because all of a sudden cancer or death became not something that happens to other people. It became something that could happen to us. And so from that standpoint, especially for me, it impacted me more than anybody else in the family. All of a sudden, I realized that I wasn't invincible, that this one life I have is a very fragile life and it can change at any moment. And that reality really started to shift the way I viewed my role as wife, as mom, the way I viewed my work. But it also impacted me from a fear standpoint. So it really turned my whole world upside down. Even though it was a best case scenario, it changed everything. And that then started to impact our family as a whole.
I can imagine. And I know you are a faithful person and your faith played a big part in this. And we'll talk about that too with your books in just a few minutes. But what I wonder is, did you go into this with a very strong faith or did it get stronger as a result of this? How did that play into the whole scenario?
Well, I would say I went into it thinking I had a very strong faith. So my parents became Christians. They came to faith when I was just a little bit under a year old. So I really did not know life without having faith be a part of it. Faith had been part of my life as long as I could remember. However, having to face the reality of death is like a magnifying glass on what is, okay? And so it forced me to look at my faith and decide, do I really believe what I say I believe, or is it just something I'm pretending? So is this faith thing that I've carried as a banner in my life I was 39 years old at the time of that diagnosis. So in the 39 years I had lived, I had always claimed to be a person of faith. Did I mean it? Or was I just playing the game? And that's what facing your death really forces you to discern the truth of what you claim to believe.
I'm sure. And probably for your kids too, I would imagine to some extent. I know, when I was 12, my mom had melanoma. She got diagnosed with melanoma. And it was like suddenly I had been going to church every day since I was born. Suddenly it took on some powerful meaning for me as a child too. So I would imagine with your boys that happened a little bit maybe.
Yeah, it definitely created opportunities for more conversation. But that, again, that first diagnosis, because it ended up being a best case scenario, they didn't need to do any radiation or chemo. I don't think it penetrated my children as much because, they were younger. I mean, these were teenage boys, 18, 17, 13. And if it doesn't impact their daily life, it doesn't quite sink in.
I understand.
And right. So it hit them somewhat, but didn't quite sink in. That was to come later.
Well, and thank goodness that all went well. And so about maybe was it the beginning of 2011 where you felt pretty confident that it was clear and that you were moving forward well?
Yeah, it was probably spring 2011. So a few months later, I had I'd processed through the fear and the recovery and all of the different implications of getting the cancer diagnosis. And I was really just about at the place of going, okay, we've got this, we're moving forward, everything's great. And about that time, my second son graduated from high school. And that's anybody who's been through graduation with a senior know that it's its own animal. It's just its own animal. And so here my second son is getting ready to graduate from high school. And about this point, my husband and I are thinking, yeah, empty nest is looking pretty good right about now.
Okay. So, if our listeners were paying close attention at the beginning of this, you did not say you had 3 children. You said 6.
Yes.
Wait a second. Something's not adding up here. We've got children graduating. You're about to empty nest. Did you just change your mind and decide to start having babies again? Tell us.
Oh, wouldn't that be funny?
Yes.
Well, literally. So the phone call about the cancer diagnosis came in December. In July, exactly 2 months after my son graduated from high school. So my son graduated May 19th. I think it was May 19th. And then it was exactly 2 months later, July 19th. We got another phone call, but this time the phone call came from a relative who knew of a mom who had three children, twin 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. And the question was asked of us, this mom could no longer take care of her children because of some challenges in her personal life. And so the question was asked of us, will you take them? So here we are. We have 2 boys now graduated from high school. One that has turned 14, getting closer to getting his driver's permit. I've just come through cancer and have a clean bill of health. And now we're asked, will you take in 2 twin 4-year-olds and a 5-year-old?
Wow. Now I have to ask, why do you think you were asked? What was it that made them think, I need to call Michelle and see if she would like to do this?
Well, my husband and I had always had a passion for missions and for reaching out for the poor and the lost. In fact, our plan had been, part of why I got my nursing degree was so I could serve on the mission field. And my husband and I, our plan was that when our boys graduated and we were empty nesters, at some point we were going to sell everything and we were going to go serve on the mission field. And then when we got this phone call, so our family knew that this was kind of our heart, that we had a heart for children and orphans and things like that. But when this phone call came, obviously the question was like, yes, you just finished a marathon of parenting. Now we want you to go back and run the whole marathon over again. Yep. And our thought was, no. But at the same time, we remembered that we wanted to sell everything and go in the mission field. And I felt so clearly that God was saying to me in his own way, okay, I didn't hear audible words, but I felt impressed on my spirit that God was saying, you told me you would sell everything and go serve me on the mission field. I'm bringing the mission field to you. Wow. I'm bringing the mission field to you. Are you still game? And what do you say? That's always been our heart. It was just packaged differently than we had anticipated. And so, of course, 24 hours later, my husband and I packed up our car and we went and drove to another state. And we picked up twin 4-year-olds and a 5-year-old, and our lives have not been the same since.
Oh, that is just amazing. Was it a quick decision? It sounds like it had to be pretty urgent. Was it a quick decision, or did you?
Yes, it was a quick decision, but I would say this is the beauty of how I believe God works through our lives. It was a quick decision, but the thing that actually prepared my heart to be ready for this was cancer. because cancer brought everything into focus, that our lives are not just about building empires and making money and having fancy houses. We've been given this gift of life so we can turn around and reinvest it in others. And we reinvest it first at home with our families. But then there comes opportunities where there are other people that need a family. And if we really believe what we say we believe, then we open the doors to them too. And so even though it was a quick decision as far as the practicality of it, the decision was in process as God was working in our hearts in the months leading up to that moment in time.
Right. That's so awesome and amazing. And having already blended your family once, now you're blending your family again. And I'm sure there was a whole different set of challenges this time. So how was that? Was it hard, or was it not as bad as you might have expected? How would you classify it?
I mean, any kind of blending, anytime you take people that have experienced loss, okay? So once again, we're in a situation where multiple people have experienced loss and we've put them in the household together. That's never going to be easy. That is never going to be easy. It's never going to be smooth. It's never going to be without tension. However, one thing that we learned over time is that just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not good.
Absolutely.
And so remembering that, it was hard. It was just hard, grueling. It still is hard. That doesn't mean it's not good. Sometimes the hardest things in our lives are the most worthy things. The hardest things in our lives are the biggest teachers, the things through which we gain the most wisdom and the greatest lessons, and we develop character and all of that. So yeah, was it easy? Absolutely not. One of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing I've ever done. Was it worth it? Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. And ironically, again, this, just as the cancer had prepared me for this new season and this new decision in part, being step parents and having a blended family gave us so much insight into what a non-traditional family looks like. And so our expectations were different than somebody who has a traditional family mindset, because we understood that when you throw people together that come from grief, there is going to be struggle. And
the lessons that you learn and then that you share are so important to other people. And I just can't put a fine enough point on what you just said about those things in life that we work the hardest for, that are the hardest, that we struggle with the most, oftentimes are the sweetest rewards. And I think if everyone can just sort of try to keep that in mind in those rough, bumpy times, whether it's family things or work things or personal things, it goes along with the idea of outside of your comfort zone. I can't think of one significant achievement in my life that hasn't come without discomfort in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's fabulous that you've been able to translate it. So if I'm keeping track, we've been now traditional family, single parent, blended parents, and now adoptive parents as well.
We've done it all.
Heck, is there anything else still? Am I missing anything?
I don't know. I think I pretty much covered it all. I can't think of anything that I've missed at this point. Let's just pretend I've covered it all, because I don't want any more experience.
Well, except there's still grandma might come along here.
Oh, yes. That would be okay. Not anytime soon, since none of my kids are married, but someday.
Someday down the road. So at what point then were you with, by the way, the adopted ones, daughters, are they daughters? All what?
Two girls and one boy. The twins are a boy, girl, and then the oldest one is a girl. There's only 9 months between the twins and the older one, 9.5 months. So you just might as well call them triplets because they're almost.
And how was all of a sudden being a girl mom for you? How's that been?
I am completely out of my element. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I had no idea the kind of theatrics that can happen over what kind of outfit each girl is going to wear every day. I had no idea.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, welcome to that world. And it just keeps going. I mean, the best thing I did for my girls was put them in theater, because that at least channels their drama.
We're working on that. One of my girls, I've nicknamed her Hollywood, because the drama is just so good. I'm like, you have a real talent.
And maybe that's a path for her. So, Well, and so people listening might be like, wow, Michelle's just been through a lot and this is amazing. The story's not done yet.
No.
Just when you think the story is sort of leveling out, here comes another curveball. Tell us about it.
Yes. So we, those first 2 to 3 years of having 3 additional children in our family were just ripe with adjustments and tension and processing and all of that for all of us. I mean, so good, so sweet in many ways, but just, it's like a full-time job. Really, I could have quit working completely and just done this full-time. And so we were about 3.5 years into that, thinking that we're starting to get over the hump and things are starting to look better. And this was actually my final son, of my older 3 boys, the youngest of the older 3 boys. It was his senior year of high school. So we now have another senior in high school and we're getting ready to launch him. And in the middle of that year, I get another phone call from a doctor letting me know that the cancer has come back for a second time.
And that's just, how do you react to that? Just where?
Well, yeah. At this point, we're 3 years out. And so I'm thinking at this point, it's basically off my radar. I think it's gone. I still do checkups every 6 months, but I think I'm not going to have to think about cancer ever again. And so it completely leveled me when I heard that it was back for a second time. And of course, when it comes back more aggressive, more advanced than before. This time they needed to do surgery. And the surgery was longer. And this time they took out 1/3 of my tongue. So you can hear that I speak with a little bit of a lisp. Took out 1/3 of my tongue. They rebuilt it with a biological graft to give me some more tongue inside my mouth. The recovery was 8 weeks long. And I had to learn to eat and drink and speak again. And then had to make some pretty significant decisions about treatment options and all of that. But once again, the doctors felt like they got it all. So we put cancer in a box and put it to the side and never expected to see it again. However, this time, 7 months later, let's see, March. Yep. 8 months later, I got another phone call from the doctor and the cancer came back for a 3rd time. So I ended up having it twice in 1 year. The 3rd time it came back far more aggressive, far more advanced than the first 2 times. The doctors literally gave me 2 weeks to get my affairs in order. I was recording podcasts with Michael Hyatt for the This Is Your Life podcast. I was on tour with an organization called Women of Faith, where I was in a different city in the U.S. every weekend on tour. So I had 2 weeks to kind of close everything down and close everything up. I recorded my first book on audio during that 2-week period. And then I flew home. And once again, the week of Thanksgiving, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I went into another surgery. And this time the surgery was 9 hours long. They removed 2/3 of my tongue. They needed to do an incision in my neck, in my arm. I was cut from wrist to elbow, in my leg as well. They took all these different parts of my body to help rebuild my tongue and my neck, remove lymph nodes, everything else. Basically, I ended up being like a puzzle piece. Like I was just cut like a puzzle. I was pieced all over. They gave me I was in the ICU for a week, in the hospital for a week. Then they sent me home, gave me about 4 weeks to recover during Christmas. And then right after Christmas, I started a very intensive external radiation and chemotherapy. Basically what they said they had to do is throw everything but the kitchen sink at me to give me the best chance of being able to live. And so over the next 6 weeks, they took me to the very edge of life in the hope of getting all the cancer. And then what followed that, I was in the hospital one more time during that period as well. And then what followed that was literally 2 years of coming back to life. Learning how I had a feeding tube for 5 months. I had a tracheostomy for 2 months. And so learning how to swallow again, drink water again, going to a speech therapist, learning how to be able to speak at all, learning how to be able to eat normal food without having to have a feeding tube keep me alive. And then just the physicality of the kind of treatment that I went through. I was on the couch for most of 10 months. to a year. And so it took a full 2 years for me to slowly rehabilitate to the point where I could live somewhat of a normal life after that.
And the one thing that keeps just flashing in my mind as you're telling me this, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Surely you must have had to rely on your people for help. How much did you just have to say, obviously people are going to reach out when you're going through this, but tell me a little bit about how you were helped and kind of who stepped in to carry some of that weight.
Yeah. So I was able to wake up every day, and my full-time job was to survive. That's it. I could not be a mom. I could not be a wife. I could not do anything. I remember, I'm so stubborn. I'm pretty much a high achiever, stubborn, self-sufficient woman. I would drive myself to the doctor's office or drive myself to the grocery store, and I couldn't make it out of the parking lot. So I would try. So I was really non-functional from a wife and mom standpoint. So it required a village just to help our family get through that year. We had friends that were bringing meals 3-4 times a week for probably 5 months.
Wow.
Because I couldn't stand up in the kitchen to cook. My husband had to work full time because all of a sudden I went from a full-time income producing member of the family to being unable to work at all. So I made 0 income basically for a year. So he had to work full time. We still had 4 children at home, and the youngest 3 required tons of attention. They were, 6 and 7, 7 and 8 at the time, so pretty little. We had neighbors who organized a laundry service to come and get our laundry once a week, just to help take the edge off of that piece of it. We had a woman who came to our house every other week to help clean it. I couldn't get off the couch. I couldn't do anything. So we had all kinds of support from a practical standpoint. But as you know, families are complicated animals, right? So we were just in survival mode for about 1 to 2 years of just trying to get through. And then following that, we had to then basically work on putting our family back together. There was all kinds of internal relational work we had to do in marriage and with children and parenting and everything else to bring our family back to a place of health.
And that was hard work, again, with hurt people and yep. Hard work. And I'm sure, once again, your faith had to play a huge part in that for you. Massive.
I can't really overstate that. And I know some people are not necessarily people of faith, and I have great respect for that because trust me when I say, when you deal with cancer 3 times and you've prayed for healing and it doesn't come and all that kind of stuff, I have wrestled through all kinds of questions about faith and doubts and everything else. So I have great respect for that journey. But I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, if it wasn't for my faith in a God who loves me and sent his son Jesus to die for me and suffered for me, I would not have made it through this experience at all. That was my lifeline. That is the one thing that kept my head above water and gave me some kind of hope for the future and some kind of will to live. There were some days where it was all I could do to muster up any will to live at all whatsoever. And the source of that was my faith, hands down.
And that hope piece is so important. I know Zig Ziglar said, and maybe others too, but when there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. And clearly that must have been your power to get through this.
Absolutely, without a doubt. All of us at some point in time are going to have to face our mortality. It's an unavoidable fact of life. There is nobody that has escaped death right. Except for God, for those who believe. There's nobody that has. So at some point, all of us are going to have to face our mortality. And when that happens, we're going to need to wrestle through what we believe about eternity and what we believe about God. The problem is that if we put that off too long, then we're in a place of suffering and we have no ability to wrestle through that. And so, one of the things I encourage people all the time now is, now that I have had to face life and death head on, is to ask the questions and wrestle through it right now, because all of us need to have hope of something that's bigger than ourselves. We need to have something bigger than our own individual existence that gives us meaning and purpose to life. And my husband and my children are certainly part of that. But the truth is that they are mortal as well. And they are not going to live forever as well. And so for me, this has been a very a very big demarcation point for me individually, but also for our entire family. Because I need to be doing that work with my children now of engaging in those kind of conversations so that they even now have the ability to find a purpose that's bigger than just themselves. Just in their individual selves. They need to see life from a vantage point that is far bigger than their own individual perception of themselves and what they want with life. They need to have something bigger than that.
And not just your children, you've made it possible for many to kind of benefit from this. So tell us about, to some extent, Undone, that tells your story. And then I Am. Tell us about that so that our audience can know about that.
So I Am is really, I wrote I Am. I contracted that book before cancer came back the second and third time. So I didn't know what was coming. But it ended up being providential for me to be writing that book, because I wrote that book in that year after treatment ended, when I was slowly coming back to life. And I Am is all about knowing who we are because of who God is. So it's all about identity, for us to be able to figure out who we are. So I was a communicator who made her living as a speaking coach, as an international speaker, as someone who was doing podcasts and radio all the time. And now all of a sudden I have a permanent speech disability, and speaking requires extraordinary effort. I mean, you've heard me stumble over different words left and right. Speaking requires so much effort and intentionality on my part. So the question was, do I have any value as a communicator if I can't do it perfectly? If I can't do it with clarity and excellence, who am I? And as I've consulted with so many different organizations and people, individuals, I've come to realize that all of us, every single one of us, will encounter something in our lives. It may not be cancer, but we'll all have our own version of cancer that will cause us to wrestle with who we are and to face our sense of identity. And if you and I build our identity on our careers and our achievements and our talents and our roles and our relationships, sooner or later, something's going to happen to interrupt all of those. So that means you and I need to build an identity on something outside of ourselves, something outside of how hard we work and how talented we are and what great relationships we have and all of that. We need to have an identity that is rooted outside of ourselves. Just like a tree is only as rooted as what it wraps its roots around. Okay, a tree isn't rooted to itself, it's rooted to the ground. The moment a tree gets rooted to itself, it falls over. Just like a tree has to wrap around its roots around something bigger and stronger than itself. You and I, if we're going to have a secure identity, must wrap our roots around something beyond us, beyond our talents and our roles and achievements, and even beyond our ability to be a good mom or a good wife, because some days we're going to blow it. And then when we blow it, we don't feel very good about ourselves. But if our identity is wrapped up in who we are as a creation of a loving God, then no matter how many times we fail, or even if we succeed, our identity is intact. We don't ride on the roller coaster of other people's opinions or our own successes or failures.
And that's so important. And that's the message then that you share in this book. So I just want to make sure everyone who's here knows we're going to put a link to, Michelle has these two books, Undone, which is sort of the story in more detail that she shared with us today. Yeah. And then I Am, which is, it's sort of, would you say, a devotional book?
Yes, it's set up in really small nuggets. So it has 60 chapters and it's a 60-day journey. But I have just found, for me, I couldn't handle 20 pages of information. I needed to have little nuggets that reminded me of who I was as I learned to be whole again, even with a very broken body.
And we all, at some extent, having not been through cancer 3 times, I mean, you sort of taken it to the nth degree, Michelle.
I told you I'm an achiever. You know, I just
an overachiever. But both of these are awesome. And the other thing, I'm sure people who are hearing your story and want to know more about you will want to visit your website, and we'll have a link to that too. I'm just going to say it here is Michelle Cushatt, which is 1 L in Michelle, MICHELE. CUSHATT.
Correct.
.com, right?
Yep,
and they can go learn more about you there. It's so awesome hearing, and now here we are. So how many years past this are we? Where are we right now?
Okay, it's 2017. So coming up on this Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving is about a month away. That will be 3 years since that third diagnosis. So it's been 3 years since I had most of my tongue removed, and my whole body was basically taken to the brink of death. So, hey, I'm here and I'm speaking and I'm doing it. So that's good news. And just for those who were wondering, because people always ask, at this point, I'm cancer free, which is wonderful, very thankful. But I also, after 7 years of dealing with cancer, I've now come to a place, I don't think it's the point. I just don't think it's the point. Death can seal us at any moment, at any moment. You and I could get in the car today and have a car accident. Things can happen at any moment. So if our goal is to avoid pain and avoid death, then we're going to live a very scarcity, fear-based life. If our goal is to leverage the moment we have in front of us to the best of our ability, then we will have joy until the moment God takes us home.
And what a valuable lesson. So what is your what do you see as your life mission now? I mean, obviously getting the rest of your children raised and launched is a big part of it. Is it sharing this message? Is it helping others find hope? Do you have career aspirations? What are you looking forward to in your future?
Well, I am under contract to write 2 more books, so I'll definitely be writing 2 more books over the next 4 years. But really, I mean, my personal mission statement is I create safe spaces for honest conversations about the tensions between real faith and real life. I do that first and foremost with my husband and my children. Anything that I can do to create safe spaces for honest conversations about the tensions between real faith and real life, that's what I do with my grown boys, with my little children, with my spouse. But in the books I write and the speaking I do, I just want to give people permission to engage in the harder conversations about what gives our lives meaning and purpose. So that way you and I, with our own unique stories, can live it out to our fullest capacity for as many days as we have.